Well, my name's Shirley Arabin. I'm going to talk about my a maternal aunt, Kate Booth, who was one of my mother's older sisters.
And tell us about Kate and what she did in World War One.
Right. Well, Kate was a nurse. She started her training at Greytown Hospital because she grew up in Carterton, or on a farm out of Carterton. But by the time war broke out, she was working as a staff nurse in Wellington Hospital. And some people in Wanganui decided to set up a convalescent hospital or home for New Zealand soldiers in Egypt. And they raised money in the Wairarapa, Manawatu and Wanganui districts and sent some women from those areas over to Egypt. And there was matron Early and then two nurses who were regarded as sisters in the nursing term, Kate Booth and her first cousin Nora Hughes, who were both of course in the Wairarapa, and then there were several young women from Wanganui who went as VADs, which I believe stands for Voluntary Aid Detachment. And they were to look after soldiers who needed to convalesce after they came out of the army hospitals and basically go back to the war. They weren't badly enough wounded to be sent home, so they patched them up.
So what did they provide for them at the Aotea home?
Well, it was supposed to be a home away from home, and it was called things like A Little Bit of New Zealand and Egypt and so forth. They had rest and treatment, of course, and they had a lot of recreation. They played tennis and golf and cricket. They had a piano and they did theatricals, a lot of cross-dressing there. There is a photo of a soldier and slave with Nora's dress. And they went on picnics and rode donkeys, and when they became well they visited the pyramids and did all the usual things. And soldiers went there as an alternative to going on leave in Cairo because you could apparently just drop in and have a meal. And once again these people from the Wanganui, Wairarapa and the Manawatu area sent over food parcels and a tremendous lot of money, so that the nurses in the hospital also were able to make up parcels to post out to soldiers in the field, and were able to feed and accommodate people who dropped in.
Yes, tell us about the food, because that was one of the features, wasn't it? The scones, particularly.
Yes. Well, in one of the newspaper clippings I read, it said that Kate Booth's scones were known throughout the Middle East. They did things like make a Christmas pudding, and all the soldiers took a turn at stirring the pudding and that sort of thing. And I think it was such a change for them from army rations. I think that was the thing that was important. They were to have, originally, they were to have been in tents. They were going to be in 25 tents. But by the time the nurses arrived on a ship called the Arabia in October of 1915 rather, there was a prince's palace available for them, and that was the accommodation. And they could use the roof. It had a flat roof, and they even had beds on the roof, and they had tents outside as well. So sometimes there were over 100 people in it, and they reckon that the several thousand went through before the war was over.
Certainly you find it on a lot of servicemen's records that they went to the Aotea home.
Yes.
Must have had a lot of people through their hands. I've read it described as a little piece of heaven on earth, in fact.
Yes. Well, I suppose too the army discipline too was more relaxed there. Though Kate did help in one of the general hospitals, because I do have one letter that she wrote that Mum must have kept, one of the numerous letters, because they were all a great bunch of letter writers, war and peace. And in that she mentions them busy at the 27th, which I assume was the 27th General Hospital, and she would go down there for the day and work and do dressings and things like that. But they did have Australians visiting them as well, not as, I don't know whether they were patients, because she was very interested in the light horse regiments who were in that war in Palestine, and she was a great, not what you call it, fan of the poetry of Banjo Paterson, because he was one of the Australians that they used to see, and they'd go riding with them, and because they were all farm girls, you see, everybody rode, and Nora's horse bolted one day, and it was Banjo Paterson who galloped after her and grabbed the reins of the horse, saved the day.
Because he was in charge of the remounts for the light horse, so horses were his thing.
That's
apart
right.
from poetry.
I think he was a major in the light horse. Yeah. So she was very, as a person, she was very much a nursing sister. By the time I knew her, well, other than when I was really small, she was living in Takapuna, still known as Sister Booth, and not a woman you trifled with.
No, the pictures of her show someone very amiable looking, but you could see that she had a very firm will, and I think most of those nurses were like that, and they had to be.
Yes, that's right.
So you knew her quite well?
Yes, she died when I was in the 6th form. She died relatively early for my mother's family, because my mother and some of her other sisters lived to around 90 or 101 in Eva's case. But Kate was at home. They used to go down to the Wairarapa in the spring, because they had this great field of daffodils, and they flowered usually just at the end of the August school holidays. And she was down there chopping firewood, I think my mother said, because my mother was there too. I was at boarding school, and Kate had some sort of turn. I don't know whether it was a stroke or a heart attack, and she actually died in Masterton Hospital. She's buried in the soldiers' part of the Clareville Cemetery in Carterton. And there are lots of her relatives in that cemetery. It's full of booths, going back to my great-grandparents. But she had grown up not far from there. When she was a young woman, she lived, before they had the farm, she lived in High Street, in the main street, and she went to the Clareville School and later to Parkvale School. But neither she nor Nora had any secondary education. I don't know what the requirement for nursing was in those days, but of course she was 25 when she started her training. She features in the papers a lot in the golf and the tennis tournaments, and the results. She was obviously a good tennis player, as Nora was too, because they all had tennis courts. All those farmers all had a tennis court, and at Middle Run, where Kate lived, my grandfather's place, they had their own golf course as well. So they all played.
So what effect do you think her war service had on her?
Well, I think it probably reinforced her interest in nursing, because she remained, she never married. She nursed in Gisborne when she first came back from the war. Then she travelled quite a bit, and she went back to Egypt and did private nursing there, and then had travelled in America and Europe, and then came back and nursed for a while in Fiji at Singatoga Hospital. And I think by the 1930s she was doing private nursing in Auckland, because she actually features in death notices in the paper where somebody has died, and they say, thank you for the care from Dr. So-and-so and Sister Kate Booth. So I think that she nursed people in their own homes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So she was born in a little town and travelled right round the world, a couple of times from
Yes.
Saturday, and then buried and came back full circle at the end.
Yes, and lived in Takapuna, and that's where I remember her the most from. She had a lot of memorabilia and souvenirs and things she'd brought back from Egypt. Her living room had about 4 or 5 Persian carpets, one on top of each other, spread around. A lovely carved screen in the room, and a lot of brassware. She brought back a lot of brassware. Some of it trench art, not items that soldiers made, but things that Egyptians made from the scrap metal.
Yes.
And she brought back jewellery. This is a necklace of agates. It's one of them. There's I've got another couple of necklaces, and everyone in the family had a piece of Aunt Kate's brass, or even occasional tables and things. Beautiful stuff she brought back, but I don't know whether some of that came on the second trip when she went back to nurse in Egypt. But she must have liked the area, because I know she liked Middle Eastern food, and she used lemons a lot in her cooking, to the extent that my mother used to complain about everything had lemon in it. And she also could swear in Arabic, because if a dog came onto her property, she was known for swearing in Arabic. She had a huge garden and a lot of semi-tropical plants that you can grow in Takapuna. And yes.
Well, thank you, Shirley. Is there anything else you want to say about your Aunt Kate?
Pause here and I'll have a quick look through
Have a look
this,
and see what
if I missed anything. Well, she was at again the horticulture, that's right. District Convention. There's one thing I didn't mention, was that some of the men they were most concerned about that they were nursing were men who fought in the Jordan Valley, because they went in there on their horses and they were there for months. There was no withdrawing from the field as they did in France, every now and then where they pulled back from the front. And it was, the temperature she quoted of course was in Fahrenheit, between 130 and 140 degrees. I haven't thought about converting that. And the thing that struck them down there was malaria. And they had a lot of patients who came back absolutely skin and bone, suffering from malaria. And she was said to have caught malaria herself. I can remember my mother saying that she became ill occasionally later, and that it was because of the malaria she had caught in Egypt. But the other thing was, she did, besides the medals, the general medals that everybody won, or was awarded rather, she was mentioned in dispatches by General Allenby, and this is just a photocopy from the book on New Zealand Army nursing that Cheryl Kendall wrote, and Cheryl has the actual certificate herself, and this was for gallant and distinguished service in the field. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Well, that means something, because General Allenby was in charge of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and he was he commanded a great deal of respect. He was known as the Bull, and he was successful where other generals had failed. So if he thought you were gallant and distinguished, then you were gallant and distinguished.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Shirley, for coming in and talking to us.